Texas Lutheran University.
All right, good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming. I would like to introduce our speaker tonight with two stories, if I might. The first is short. This morning when I was reminding my classes to come to this event, and they were going to see Poet Laureate Laurie Ann Guerrero, one student who wasn't quite paying full attention perked up and said, "Oh, I thought you said green arrow." You know, different weapons for different heroes. Second story. "I'm going to need you to be terrible" were the first words I spoke to the newly chosen Poet Laureate of San Antonio. She was sitting next to the crackers and the solo cups at a second rehearsal for TEDx, which we did together. In my defense, they just come out with a draft schedule, and it said that I would be going after her, the only person on the schedule who I knew I couldn't follow. She'd mysteriously missed the first rehearsal, so I had to look up her work online to find out what I was going to be dealing with, and it was just as I feared. You know, her work evoked, in the words of the Texas Book Review, a perilous world filled with beauty and darkness. I just could not follow that. So this doesn't forgive my rude conversational gambit, and although I maintained an awkward smile, I could tell she didn't find it funny at all. She was perfectly happy to be amazing, and intended she was, although they changed the schedule so I didn't have to follow her, which was good. I think she forgave my lack of filter. "I have written in an unfiltered way since I was little," she told the world shortly after being named San Antonio's Poet Laureate. And this afternoon on Facebook, she told me, "Dude, you're hardcore." And that's what I love about her and her work. It's what the best poetry always does. It tells the truth that didn't occur to you until you hear it. And then when you hear it, it's as if you've always known it. I'm glad she's here to give us a little unfiltered, hardcore truth, no mask or arrows or hood required. She's won the Academy of American Poets Prize, the André Montoya Poetry Prize, the Panhandler Chapman Award, an International Latino Book Award. She's also on an increasing number of best of and must-read lists. She's just published her third book, A Crown for Gumecindo, and has many of her second books outside to be signed afterwards. She is your Poet Laureate, Laurie Ann.
That was really nice. Thank you. Wait, so I have to use this microphone here?
You have to use that one.
Okay. This is going to prove difficult, I think. Thank you. This is weird. I feel like I should sing a song, like I'm on American Idol. Thank you so much, all of you, for being here. I know y'all are getting extra credit and stuff, so I really appreciate y'all being here. It's really nice to be invited to a university always. I feel like you know, I give talks all the time and I give readings all the time, and I always feel like the most important audience for me are young people. And so, so thank you for the invitation, and thank you for being here with me. This feels really weird. I wonder, can you hear me if I lay it down? Yeah, is that all right? Yeah, can you hear me? We're good? Okay. I'm going to read from this book, which is for sale outside, and it's called A Tongue in the Mouth of the Dying, and I wrote this book. I feel like I've been writing this book all my life, and it was my first full-length collection that came out in 2013, and it kind of changed my life, the writing of it, and then when it was published, more so. So I'm just going to go ahead and read from, I'm just going to start, and maybe I'll tell you some stories about some of the poems as I go. But the first poem, I'm going to start with the first poem of the book, and it's called Preparing the Tongue. And I have it separate from the rest of the book because after I wrote it and was putting the manuscript together, I realized that this one little poem was more of a meditation or a prayer before entering the crazy world that I was writing about, which is different kinds of abuses, different kinds of racism, sexism, gender issues. And so this poem is called Preparing the Tongue. In my hands, It's cold and knowing as bone. Shrouded in plastic, I unwind its gauze, mummy-like, rub my wrist blue against the cactus of its buds. Were it still cradled inside the clammy cow mouth, I should want to enchant it. Let it taste the oil in my skin, lick the lash of my eye. What I do instead is lacerate the frozen muscle, tear the brick-thick cud conductor in half to fit a ceramic red pot. Its cry reaches me from some heap of butchered heads as I hack away like an axe murderer. I choke down the stink of its heated moo, make carnage of my own mouth, add garlic. When I recently gave a talk at Texas State and was in a class with students, and they had all read my book, and everybody wanted to know about this one poem, Preparing the Tongue. And you know, it's interesting to me because the poem came about because I had lived in Massachusetts for 3 years, where I finished my undergrad degree as a mother of 3 at 30 years old, and I was craving lengua tacos. Anybody eat lengua tacos? Love some lengua, right? Okay, yeah. Well, I was missing that, and I couldn't eat that in Massachusetts. I had to go a couple of towns over to find the Puerto Rican butcher that had lengua. And so when I brought the lengua back to my house in Western Mass, I didn't know how to cook it, so I had to call my mom, and she was walking me through it. And so she was doing that, but I suddenly realized I had to put everything down because I suddenly realized I was carrying this giant tongue in my hand, and there was something really sad about it, and there was something really empowering at the same time. And so when I was at Texas State, one student asked me, what was it that prompted the poem? What did you realize? Why did you have to write this poem? And I realized that, and this is why it's separate from the rest of the book, the rest of the poems are about my community and where I grew up and how I grew up. And I realized that in making this meal to feed my children, it was a perfect metaphor for taking these tragedies and these horrible things that happen in our lives and making them palatable to raise my children in this same world. So that's where that poem came from. Maybe I should have said that before I wrote it, and before I read it. Let's move on. When I was younger, we lived on a piece of land out in the country, very south San Antonio, and it was part of the Dionisio Martinez land grant of 1834, which my grandfather was really proud about. But I grew up with my grandfather living on the same piece of land, and he raised me, he and my mother. My father was a construction worker and was often gone. He had to follow the work. But a lot of the lessons that I learned from him. And so a lot of the poems that are in this book were inspired by either his stories or my experiences with him. And so this poem is called Sundays After Breakfast, A Lesson in Speech. And I name it Sundays After Breakfast because that's the time we would sit on the back porch after we had our barbacoa and Big Red. We would sit on the back porch on Sundays and he would tell the stories. So Sundays After Breakfast, A Lesson in Speech. There were no names for men like that. Gringos who stitched up their rules, their white garb, laced snug the issues of the day. Lord didn't make us to mix with them folk, they said. But God's got nothing to do with the black boys dumped still alive into that restless river. God's got nothing to do with having to tell their mamas. That bloody water ran through each dark vein across Texas, fed the Gulf, all its brown-skinned people. This Grandpa could name. Los cuerpos, bodies swaying above the cotton like sheets on a line. No importaba que no eras negro, pero que no eras gringo. No, it didn't matter that you weren't black, Grandpa says, pushing himself from the table, but that you weren't white. He lived his life this way, every man after him, opening his mouth only to eat, holding his head above the cotton, between white men and black boys. So when I was, like I said, I moved to Massachusetts with my 3 children. At the time, they were 7, 4, and newborn. But I had gotten accepted to the school that I always wanted to go to, and even though I was 27 when I got there, I knew that nothing was going to stop me. But when I moved over there, well, in 2007, there were tragedies happening in my city, in my state, and because I wasn't home, I felt like I had betrayed my community in lots of ways. There was a lot of guilt for having gone to school. There was a lot of guilt for having moved away to the north to go to school, for taking the babies away from their grandparents. And I was in the student center one day, and I was getting lunch or something, and on the TV screen on CNN, there was a flash, San Antonio, something, and I couldn't quite see what was going on. When I got to it, saw that a woman, a 19-year-old woman from the south side of San Antonio like me, had killed her 2 children and shoved their bodies under the porch, under their house. Maybe because I was postpartum, I'm not really sure, but I felt, I grieved as if they were my own children. I also grieved for the young mother, and I felt like I needed to go home. I don't know why. I mean, there was nothing I could have done. But this poem is called Babies Under the House, and I wrote it for Soraya and Sebastian, the babies. When you open your eyes again, Soraya, this will just be one of those things, like rice and bean tacos every night, having to go to the free clinic, buying gas with food stamps at Ben's Ice House at the corner of Pleasanton and Petaluma. But you know that, don't you? Know that your body will never grow completely. When you open your eyes again, your skin will be smooth as the day you were born, not what it was when they found you, and that tiny thing that was your brother. The dirt around you will have licked mother's milk from your lips, absorbed the sour scent of mother's breath on your neck, the iron-heavy taste of blood in your mouth you won't even remember. When you open your eyes again, Soraya, you will be the mother. Your tart Mexican heart won't let you be anything else. No need for grown-ups, child protective services who were too busy, the legislators who couldn't give medication, education to this poor neighborhood, this city, La Raza, with no muscle, no voice, hope decomposing in a couple of plastic bags. But there are 2 things you will have that your mother never did: a whole Soraya, a whole Sebastian. Roosters. They're roosters, she corrects me. Chubby cocks hang above our heads from the ruffle of curtain in the room where her children eat. In her kitchen next door to the house where I used to live, she laughs in 2-step, pops a couple of Dos Equis con lima. I've missed you, neighbor, I say, peering through her window into the kitchen I used to cook in, next door, looking for the painting I left behind, the curtains I sewed, looking to see if I damaged the counters with an imprint of my ass, wondering if my DNA might show up if detectives ever needed samples. Is my hair wound tightly in that carpet? Skin flakes painted into that red door? Neighbor tells me the new woman next door has a baby that cries all night, and when the man struts home at 4 in the morning, he crows like a madman. Our beer is ceremony. We talk about Maria. Remember her? Her baby Luis? Her husband? Did you know she was pregnant when he killed her? That he killed the boy first in front of her? Our children rush through the kitchen, paletas in hand, to the backyard with the men who love us today. Passing the sal con limon, we pray for the woman next door, hoping blood is never shed in my old home, like in Maria's 2 blocks down. Neighbor fluffs her curtains. Come back, she says. Come back, and when you do, I'll bring you caldo the way I did when you were expecting La Chiquita, before you moved to the snow, where roosters are thin and don't know how to dance. Are y'all awake? Oh yeah, y'all with me? Okay. I tend to bring the room down, I apologize. What was that you said, dark, and yeah, it's me. Not really, but only in my work. But if I didn't get it out in my work, I think I probably would be really dark. But when I was thinking about the kind of domestic abuse that happens so much in our communities, it was interesting to me because at the same time I was doing research on Texas folklore, La Llorona, etc. And so to this idea of these women killing their children, which happened so much, became very parallel to the folklore that we grew up with La Llorona. Is everybody familiar with La Llorona, right? So those of you who aren't, there's so many different tales, different versions, but you know, this woman kills her children, and back in the day, and some say it's out of jealousy. Her husband left her for another woman, so to get back at him, she kills her children. Another version, and the one that I side with, is that he left and the children were suffering, and it was almost out of mercy she killed her children. And I think I side with that version because it just sounds better, it feels better. But I have this poem here called Esperanza Tells Her Friends the Story of La Llorona. And it's kind of based on the idea that there are so many versions. Esperanza tells her friends the story of La Llorona. She killed her babies in the river over there by the Bill Miller barbecue place, you know, by the Holy Mother Church. She was friends with my grandma. They played bingo together, I think. Oh yeah? Why'd she kill them? They were brats. And they probably never helped her clean the house, and they were probably really whiny and always wanted candy in line at the H-E-B. How'd she do it, Espy? She drowned them one at a time, and herself too, I think. That's probably why she cries. She probably didn't mean to kill herself too. That's not how the story goes. My mom said it happened in Mexico and not San Antonio. Shut up, Patty, what do you know? Your mom's not even Mexican like us. Anyway, I think she reincarnates herself, or maybe God doesn't want her in heaven because she's crazy and she killed her own babies, but she keeps coming back. Whatever, Espy. Serious. She comes back in real life and keeps on killing her babies. But I don't think she cries anymore. She's so used to it now. She's gone to Houston, Hudson Oaks, to Plano, even back to San Antonio right here in the South Side. You think you know everything. Tell us how come sometimes she kills herself and sometimes she don't. I don't know. Maybe she cloned herself now and there are lots of Lloronas. Maybe someone you know, Patty. Maybe your mom. I like reading that one. So this idea, because I was, you know, writing these poems and living with these stories for so long, it started infiltrating my dreams. And I started having these really crazy dreams. And I had this one reoccurring dream in which I was killed. I was just being killed like 3 or 4 different ways, and I would dream this a lot. And one day I woke up and just wrote the dream down word for word. And so this one's called Morning Praise of Nightmares. When the steak knife fiddled against the sinew of my gut, I heard the slow whine, felt each ridge, felt the simmering red erupt like the juice of an overripe plum, the trickle of nectar running down the body still warm from the sun. And from the kitchen to the street fair, as it often is in dreams, children laughing, a clown, the color yellow, balloons melting against the burned sugar of the skin, and guns, tiny, like from gumball machines, in tiny hands, bullets red and green and gunmetal blue piercing the skin like botflies, their metal heads in deep until the offspring, that winged blood, gently and timidly took flight. Then the peeling of my skin. Who was that crafter whose face I never saw? That paper maker, his teacup hands, his clothespin fingers rinsing clean the lace of my forearms. The squared off torso, long sheet of leg, thick bit of finger and toe like strips of bacon, strung up, decorating that red room like black and white photos developing mountains or smiles or sex. I could taste my own blood, though I couldn't lift my hands to finish the job, put myself out of misery. I was but remains, a piled heap of slop on the floor of a house I never shared a meal in. Even my eyelids were gone, and my spine exposed. I was an afterbirth without the birthing, a too early puppy whose whole pink body thumped with each beat of his slow heart. This is my morning praise of nightmares. Open your eyes, I hear 3 mouths whisper against the flower of my skull. Mama, open your eyes. I feel like we should chat a little bit. I forgot to say too that, usually after I give a reading, I do a Q&A, but there's so, it's pretty casual, and if anybody has any question or anything while I'm reading, I have no problem answering it. Also, you should know that I am, I'm pretty open with my life, and if you have questions about me as a mother or as a student or as a writer, anything's game. This one is called Ode to My Boots. Like San Antonio, bronze in the face, white sky, timid green inlay of nopal, red flores. I trace running stitch in swirl at the shaft, finger the leathered sole. Like a shot of tequila, you courage me up from the toes, delicate grubs in tomato plants. You render me incognito among men, ferocious among women who sit cross-legged in their spiked disarmament. With you, I navigate bridges, mi coyote on the border, my twin lanterns. You wake in me the dormant cells, the not-so-ancient history of Texas, its women, slipping into something more, vaquera, embroidered crown, umbilicus, both male and female, that knowing. So my grandfather, who raised me, when I moved back to San Antonio, I took care of him for the last 5 years of his life. He passed in July of 2013. But when I came back from Massachusetts and went to go see him, he was very proud of me. I'm the only girl in the family, and on that side of the family, the only one with an education. So when I got to his house and I went to find him in the woodshed where he lived, basically, he was really happy and really proud of me, and he wanted to give me something. He said, Piyuya, it's called Piyuya. Piyuya, what can I give you? I want to give you, I don't have a lot of money, but I want to give you something. What can I give you? And I knew already what I wanted. It was something I'd wanted for a long time. I wanted him to build me a dining table from the stack of lumber that he had in the shed for like 20 years. And he thought I was crazy. I mean, he thought I was crazy for wanting a dining table made out of this wood. But he agreed to do it, and we started pulling the lumber down, and we were measuring and cutting, and then I got in his way, and he made me leave. And when I came back with a glass of water for him, he was sitting on his stool, and he was slumped over, and he was very emotional, and I could tell that he had been crying. So I was like, hey, what's up, Grandpa? And it took him a minute to sort of gather himself, and he said, I'm really tired. I'm really tired, and I love making things, but I'm over here making you this table, and I should just make a coffin. He was ready to go. This poem is called Wooden Box. He demands this, nothing else. No mahogany slick or roses kissed by lilies, no music or speech. Weeping limited. Where to file down the aisle, nod head to his dead body, return home to care for things still living. We are not to sob for the child hymn, the bed an alphabetless picker of cotton, potatoes, tomatoes, follower of crops. We are not to sob for the cactus man, vaquero, lover him, grandpa who takes his milk from the moon, who knows the time for cookie, the time for wine. No. When he is gone, he will be gone. I can make the box myself, he says. I can make it myself. So one of the major themes that runs in the book is this idea of women, many different kinds of oppression, but also there's an emergence of strong women in this book. And, well, this one's called My Mother Woke a Rooster. She wasn't surprised that morning by the stove when she cracked open a fresh brick of coffee with hands feathered as the bed from which she rose. She stood there. Upon her head, the morning sun soothed her like guitars strumming, a halo, saint, fit for a lit candle on the mantel, the dressing table. When she walked to the sink for water, a bouquet of blue and black and rose rose from the coccyx, up and over like a waterfall, swiping the sugar and cream from the counter. She was amazed by her wide presence in that tiny kitchen, the incredible strength in her thighs, the ease of the strut. In a pan hanging above the stove, she caught the reflection of herself and swooped her rubbery coxcomb back, letting it fall over one brow. She pursed her red lips, her mouth just visible deep inside a sharp beak. She watched in wonder the staccatoed swivel of her neck, rubbing what the night before was the wrinkled throat of an old woman. Her eyes now fitting on the face of a fighting cock, her red-tipped toes now claws and rough as rope. Yay! Look alive, y'all. I'm kidding. You know, one of the things that I didn't realize I was exploring while I was writing the book, that I didn't realize until much later, was the idea of being an only girl in my family and being the one who got an education and dealing with a lot of the kind of horrific things that we sometimes deal with in our homes. And now I'm raising children. I have a 17-year-old son and a 14-year-old daughter and a 10-year-old daughter. And it's interesting to me now to go back to these poems that I wrote 10-ish years ago, probably more than that, and see that I was already starting to try and work some of these things out, even though I didn't realize it then. This poem is called Early Words from My Son. You will probably make sense of it all some Wednesday afternoon as you sit with your wife and daughters, unbuckling leather footlockers, poems, your mother's curvy schedule, knowing then why I never taught you anything but how to read and how to shade by cross-hatching at the lip, under the cheekbone, on the portraits you made of me. You will probably thank me, post-puberty, for never sitting down, sparing you the talk. You will learn the way I claimed to. Some girl named Susie, who will also teach you to smoke. It took a long time before your father understood, and who knows what the hell I'll tell your sisters. But you should know that when we were lonely, and you, 9, wanting me to hold you, I just couldn't do it with my arms. You were born male, like I was born female, and all I've ever known is how to carry you in my teeth. This is the last poem I'm going to read from this collection, which I wrote. My grandfather went blind before he died, and it's called Unblinding. Unblinding. When finally the shadows grow like cactus, scraping the iris, gray as the sea, and I no longer see the articulation of a bird's wing or the curve of my own magnificent knee. When finally the nerve behind the bulbous white, that tickle of brown, forgets its job, loses its mind to time, erupting hot and slow as magma, know that I know the magic of the blind. I have cataloged your hands in my hands. So that's that one. Thank you. Thank you. It's always awkward at poetry readings. No one ever knows to clap like after each one, and it gets crazy, and so don't worry about it. It's not a big deal. This book that I'm holding in my hands is the first copy, and the book is not out yet, but I'm really proud of it. This book is called A Crown for Gumecindo. Gumecindo was my grandfather. He passed, like I said, in July of 2013. It's going to be 2 years already. It blows my mind. But after my grandfather died, I knew immediately that there was something. I thought I would write a series of poems for him to honor him. I'd obviously been writing poems for him my whole life. But I felt like there were things that I wanted to say. And after he died, I went into writing these new poems. And I thought they were going to be about praising him. And it turned out that it was more of a chronicle of my own grief. And it was really me trying to figure out that space. I had never lost anybody close to me before, so it was very new and very scary. And I chose a heroic crown of sonnets. So for those of you who don't know, a sonnet is a 14-line poem with a very rigid rhyme scheme. Mine are not that rigid. I like to keep it easy. But a heroic crown is a series of 15 sonnets. And the last line of the first sonnet begins the second. The last line of the second sonnet begins the third, and so on, and it forms a wreath or a crown. And I'm actually in the middle of an interview right now, and they're asking me why did I choose that form, why a crown? And I mean, it seemed kind of obvious to me that a man like that deserved a crown, and if he couldn't have one in life, then I certainly was going to try and give him one in death. So I'm going to read to you from this now. I hear music. Is it the ghost? The ghost violinist. Tell him to come on out. Do y'all see, I mean, does anybody had an experience with a ghost? Anybody, yeah? What, they said one of these seats is her seat. Do y'all know? It's up here? Well, there's that one right there that's open. Is that maybe hers? Oh, scary. That's crazy. So I want to say before I start this, when my grandfather died in July, I then had to keep going on my book tour. And so the first place I read after he passed, which 63 days after he passed, I was giving a reading at UTEP in El Paso. It was the first time I was ever in El Paso. And there was something about this city that, I don't know, kind of blew my mind because of its proximity to Ciudad Juarez and the femicides that have happened in recent years. I felt that that city was full of grief. And so coming there at the time that I came there, it seemed like a homecoming to me. It felt very, it felt like that was a space I needed to be in to explore my grief. I started this book there in El Paso. I realized when I turned the manuscript in to be published, or as I was about to turn it in, that I was actually incredibly jealous of the women who died because I knew then that they had my grandfather and I didn't anymore. And so I had to work through that, right? Because it was weird to feel jealousy for these women who had these horrible, brutal deaths. But they had my grandpa and I didn't anymore. At the same time, I realized that who better to lead them or to be by their side than my grandfather? And that helped me reconcile. But this first, I'm gonna probably read about 6 or 7 of them. There are 15, I won't read them all. And this first one is called Where the Dead Come to Speak, El Paso. And maybe there was a Laurie Ann who left behind 3 children, a sink full of dishes, a man who kissed her as if the whole world lived in her mouth. And maybe, too, her heart was carved out from underneath the cradle of her rib. The ocotillo motions with its strange arms. Death goes on. I conjure you in boot soles, and sand, ice and hummingbird, border walker and little girl. Have you found my likeness on the other side as I search for you here? I thought you'd be alone. You are not alone. Hadn't they their own fathers to heed, saying as mine has said, don't be alone, don't cross the line? Number 2, love is our mother. You said, don't be alone, don't cross the line, girl. The potential in my hands to raise hell, you knew before I did. We were never good, but to each other. The brain creates its devil. In this dream, he makes me choose which one of us will die by the hand of the other and which of us will carry the dead home. You kill that boy, or the boy kills you, he says. In this dream, my steady hands are not my own. Your hands load the gun. You know I cannot let him live. His bones cannot hold the weight of me. With my eyes, I see your hands. My eyes see the boy I birthed, my jaw that quivers. You wake me before you pull the trigger. Praise song for the goat at the grave, number 3. You woke me before you pulled the trigger, tempting songs from your guitar. Late night, after cabrito plucked from its mother's body, in praise of September rain, we ate. Praise September, praise rain, though I can still taste merciless July. At your grave, I nestle hard candies in wet earth as to return diamonds, as to sow seeds. I want your tongue to wind its way through the hinged lip of casket, black rock, pull them down to your softened teeth. Who knows what you're capable of now, what grows now that your heart has fed the dirt. But only goats are here, bleating songs I do not know. Only the goats are here to say hello. I'm going to skip ahead to number 7. It's called Newborns. Let's look at our reflections in the mud. See how in 4 months each of us has changed. What is your name without a body? My name without you here. I am new, what I never was. Suddenly I carry my newborn grief like a new mother. I nurse and swaddle my most fragile, my newest, my sweet. What festers in the bellies of strangers does not concern me. There is only this. I am the only mother. Mine is the only child. I decompose alongside you, wanting and not wanting everyone to see me, off-balanced and leaking, my skin in strands, the oddity that was put in my hands. Number 8, Dia de los Muertos. The oddity that was put in my hands, your truck. It used to be I drove this road each week to pick you up. Now I drive this road each week to lay you down again. Today is the day of the dead. When did you die? Today I bring you chicharrón con huevo, chile, which is to say I brought breakfast to the goats. I want to slip my hand into the photo of you, fix your hair as I did, help you with your sweater, guide heavy salt to your plate. Grass is starting to grow over you, shards of rock gone smooth. I sing to bees. I lay my ear to stone, it doesn't hurt. I hear your song, water rising from dirt. I'm going to skip ahead to number 10. This one's called Stone Fruit. Good, I would ask. Good enough, you'd say, of the wine we made from plums. Didn't we for years tend the mother tree? Didn't we for years prune, pluck, hold in our hands the purpled bodies bursting that begged, me next, have me? Weren't we so nourished in the nerve? Someone is buying our tree. You are reduced to pit. I put seed in dirt, wait for you to come back to me in a jar by the window. You are not growing. Aren't you a plum? Little red, little kidney, little mouth, singing, calling, I'm here, I'm here. I thought the dirt would give you something to take hold of. I've buried everything I've ever loved. Number 11, casketing. I've buried everything I've ever loved in the bone of reason. Now, even in dreams, you are dead. Sometimes I wheel your metal-colored coffin to the grocery store, once to a paperie, twice to Fiesta Bakery on Pleasanton. You are heavy. Once I was in high school in a play and parked you stage left. Always I shake you, wake up, damn you. Sometimes the casket is open and I kick you. And when in my small shoes I make contact, your ribs crumble like the bark of an old mesquite. Wake up, wake up. We can't run the numbers. Argue, make your mother's bread if you are always going to be dead. And this is number 12, untouchable. If you are always going to be dead, who then will melt away the breasts from my chest? Need more my eyes than the unraveling of my hips. In your house, I was all bedrock and teeth, cutthroat, stopped clock, just as much man as woman, or rain. You were blind, and I loved you for it. In your house, my shoulders grew to fit the work. Patience blossomed upon my head, a crown. You were my mirror, my name, ready plum of my right hand, my ancient and rivered neck, my compass, my wing, my open gate, my warrior, my sleepless legion, as if I had been born male. My kingdom come. And one day in hot July, my kingdom gone. I'm gonna stop there. Thank you. I have my tissue in my bag. I have maybe one or two more poems, new poems that I'm writing now, but I thought maybe now would be a good time to take some questions. Yeah, hold on, let me be like Oprah. I don't know, go ahead, I'll just stand here. Yeah, yeah, I did. I had to start with the first one because the last line had to start the next, and so I didn't know where I was going to end up. I had no idea what I really thought the poems were going to be like retelling his stories or like funny, or I didn't know they were going to be as heavy and as dark as they ended up being. But yeah, I mean, I had to go. Like I was a mess. I was a mess, and I chose the sonnet because it was such a. I don't like form. I'm just not into like people telling me how to do things, and so it was really. At the time, I felt so all over the place, and I felt like the sonnet itself was like a little vessel that I had to put aside my emotion to work, right? Because this is work now, because you have to follow all these rules. And so it was kind of like a saving grace for me, right? Because I had to push my stuff aside. But because of that, I didn't know what emotion was going to come next. I didn't know, so I had to just go line by line, like whatever was coming up. The one sonnet that I did the most revision on was the first one. But that was because by the time I got to number 12, 13, I recognized my jealousy. And I had to go back and name it. I felt like that was really important. I mean, I think it's horrible. I mean, it's awful. But I felt like when you're grieving, you do awful things. You think awful things, like anybody but mine, you know? So it was just a hard, I don't know if that answers your question, I'm sorry. Is that, yeah, no, okay. Anybody else? I started in September of 2013, right after he passed, and I went back to El Paso in August to finish the sonnet. So it took me a year, because then I took another month to revise. But I had won a grant, I had won 2 grants, which allowed me to not teach for 2 semesters. And all I was doing was writing these poems. That's it, I wasn't doing, I was taking care of my kids, kinda. I was like really not present at all that year. Sometimes I'm still not. Whatever, I wrote a book. Like, I'm all right with it. Like, thank you for that question, Margie. Yeah.
So does it get easier or harder for you to read them?
It get both. It's certainly gotten easier because as I was writing them, I was on book tour, right, that year too. So, and I was reading what was new because I get tired of reading the same stuff over and over. And when I first started reading the sonnets, I would just lose it. And it was embarrassing. And so now I'm okay, like I can keep it pretty much together. But what I realized when the book, like this is the first copy, like I said, and it just came out, and so now I realize that I'm done. And so I think that's why it choked me up a little bit, because I'm done. Like I have to put him aside. Yeah. Thanks. I'm just kidding. Good looking out, Steve. Just kidding. How about y'all in the back? Okay. No, go ahead.
Learn about your grief or grieving in general as you wrote these poems.
I can only speak for myself and what I have experienced, and I feel like after I lost him, I didn't want to talk to anybody who did not know what I was going through. So if you had not lost anybody, if you didn't lose your dad or your grandfather or your mother or somebody who was like a lifeline, then I didn't want to be around you. And because I was like touring and doing events, I was really bad company for a really long time. I think I am still sometimes, like I'm still trying to work that out. But with people who have lost somebody, I feel in communion with them. I feel like I've gained a kind of knowledge that it's horrible to have to know that, but I do feel like there's a reason why I know it, why we know when, loss like that. But I also feel that I was lucky enough that I didn't have to teach, that I do believe that was my grandfather, like, here's money, just throwing money at me. Thanks. Because I needed to be in my grief. And I made it a point to not have to check myself with anybody in that space. I indulged what I wanted to indulge. If I wanted to drink Jack and Coke all day long, that's what I did. I don't recommend that. I'm not proud of that. But I didn't know how to console myself. And so I let myself do whatever it was I needed to do. And I have a very supportive family that allowed me to do that too. My mother was constantly coming to help me with the kids. a very supportive husband who wouldn't touch me, would just leave me alone. That's what I needed. I don't know. I think I will always be learning what grief has taught me. I don't, you know what I mean? I don't know. I know that I have thought some really crazy things, like being jealous of the women who were murdered. That's crazy, But I don't know. Yeah, I'm not very articulate today. Yeah. I don't speak fluent Spanish. So no, not total, but Spanglish, Tex-Mex, yeah. Throw some, things, words that I'm comfortable with, I'll use, but I don't use anything that I'm not comfortable with. Yeah. Yeah.
What went into the decision to move to Massachusetts with your kids and start school?
Well, I was really lucky in that I've been writing since I was about 8 years old. And I wanted to be a rock star, So I was writing songs. Although I wasn't a musician, they were just lyrics. So I realized now that I was, writing poems or lyrics. When I was 14 years old, I went to McCollum. I don't know if anybody's from San Antonio, but I'm from the South, and I went to McCollum High School. And my, wait, San Antonio, what? Right here, yeah, all right. What? South side over here. I had a teacher when I was 14 years old who's the first person in the world who had ever said that I was a poet. And so it changed my vision of myself. I wasn't just some punk kid. I wasn't just a girl. I was going to be a poet. I was a poet. She called me a poet. And she also started giving me books. Read this, read that. I discovered Sylvia Plath when I was 14. And I read Lady Lazarus. And I remember thinking, holy shit, like, how do you write like that? Like, I want to do that. I want to be so empowered that I can write like that unapologetically, write like that. And so we didn't have internet, so I would start reading biographies and things like that. And she went to Smith College. Never heard of it, didn't know anything about it, but I decided at 14 that's where I'm going to go to school because I wanted to write like that. And so, of course, I got married at 18, and all of that kind of went out the window. But when I was pregnant with my daughter, my 14-year-old, my first girl, that changed everything for me because suddenly I was going to be raising a daughter, somebody who was going to be a woman here. And I knew that if I wanted her to do anything, I needed to do something for myself. So I wrote them an email and said, I want to come. What do I need to do? I don't know what to do. Help me. So I applied, and I keep spitting, sorry. Like, that's going to be all on that video. Just, so I applied, and I got a full scholarship. And then I got accepted in March, and in August, I found out I was pregnant with my third child. And I kid you not, I laid out on the bathroom floor for 4 days crying because everybody told me that that was a sign, that I needed to stay home. I wasn't supposed to go to college. You're not supposed to move away. You need to stay home. That's a sign. And I thought that was, I don't know, like I contemplated it. I contemplated staying home. But I didn't. I waited. Baby was born in April. We moved in August, and I started my job. Baby was weeks old when I started at Smith. And I graduated 3 years later and moved back home to take care of my grandpa. Yeah. So that's how I ended up in New England. Yeah, it's the hardest thing I ever did, but it was absolutely the best thing I've ever done, for sure. Yeah? No more? Yeah.
Are there any writings that you have kept or keep to yourself, just for you?
Yes. Yeah, I'm actually, Jesus, that's a horrible question. I mean, it's a great question, but I cannot tell a lie. I do, yes, of course. And I'm writing fiction now. I'm actually working on a novel. And I think a lot of those things that I have kept to myself, that because I'm so open and I'm like, oh, poetry, it's all about my life. Not all of it. Not all my poetry is about me, but a lot of the stories that I've written are finding their way into this novel. Yeah. So I don't know. I might pull them out. I don't know. I'm playing with it right now. It's not. I've never written fiction before, so it's. I don't know. Yes. Yes, to answer your question. Yes, sir.
Is there a grandmother, or was there a grandmother that was significant for you?
I was not close to my grandmothers. My grandfather's wife, they married when I was about 6, but she was very quiet, and my grandfather, I had been with him, I don't know, we were close. I mean, I loved her and cared for her the same as I did for him, but he was the one who would talk. He was the storyteller. And I was the only girl in the family. So I was always on his back or under his arm or in the dirt with him. We were close, I just was never close with her. Yeah, I mean, I was close with her. That's horrible. She's in my acknowledgments. She was of the generation that was silent, right? She was older than he was. She was silent. She worked very hard to keep the house completely orderly and spotless. She did everything for my grandfather. I adore this woman for what she did for him, that allowed him to be out in the garden with me. I adore her. I was not close to her. She'd never told me stories. But thank you for asking. Nobody ever asked that question. Thank you. Yeah. Of course. Number one pops in my head is Pablo Neruda. I love Neruda. There's so many contemporary poets right now that are amazing and doing really amazing work. Aracelis Germay, Natalie Diaz, who is reclaiming the Mojave language. I mean, there's just a lot. I mean, we could go on forever. I love Lucille Clifton. She's one of my favorites. There's only one poem that I have memorized that I carry in my body, and it's a Lucille Clifton poem. I don't even memorize my own stuff. But hers, that one was a life-changing, and I didn't even know I had it memorized until one day I was giving a talk and just started reciting it. Yeah. Yes?
I know this one, and a lot of things are inspired by your grandfather, but what else inspired you? Like, what sticks out to you to make you have to put, words to paper and write them?
That's a good question. Yeah, I think when we come from a history that has been erased, marginalized, I feel that I was, like the passion, the desire that I've had for all my life to write, coming to the page as a little girl because I was the girl and nobody was listening to me. Nobody gave a damn about what I was doing or anything. And it was coming to the page that I learned how to speak. And so I felt very empowered by that. And so having carried that all my life, the kind of empowerment that I can get from writing down my own truths, whether they're yours or not, they're my truths. Now that I'm in a position that I'm in, as I became an adult and especially as I had my children, I suddenly realized that there were so many truths not being told, right, in our communities, as a woman, as a brown woman, as a poor woman. And so I feel an urgency because I was given this gift, because I had access to an education like my parents didn't, like my grandparents didn't. So I feel a huge responsibility now to speak. And not just a responsibility, but it's a huge honor as well that I need to honor that responsibility. Does that make sense? Yes, sir.
What other places do you reference in your poems? I grew up on the other side of Pleasanton, on the Harmdale side.
That's where my husband's a teacher at Harmdale. Oh. What? Outside. You're on the other side of military. What other places do I reference? I talk about, well, you heard Fiesta Bakery on Pleasanton. Commercial. I mean, like that, is that what you mean? Like little places in the South? Yeah, I mean, in the novel that I'm working on, it's about the South Side, and it takes place from the 1800s all the way to the present day, and it's all like Roosevelt, Flores, like it's all South Side, Zarzamora, yeah. Because I'm down, because you know what, honestly, like the first time that I had a poem published that had like a street name from where I was from, or actually Naomi Shihab Nye has a poem called Old Man on South Flores. And I think it's called that, something about South Flores. And the first time I read that, I was like, what? I've been there. Like, and that, like I live off of there. And it made me feel like we were on the map, right? And it became so important to me to name the spaces where we live. And I do it in all my books and everything I write, I name the spaces. Because it felt good to me. And that I have this kind of, it's empowering to be able to do that, and it feels good. Totally. Yeah, and that's old school. Yeah. Yeah, cool, that's a good question. Anybody else? No, you giggles? No? All right, okay, go ahead.
Are you writing it like a story, or are you writing it kind of like epic poetry?
I'm actually, it's a book about 6 different women. The youngest is a 10-year-old poet from 1989. The oldest is like a 185-year-old woman, present day, who's addicted to her iPad. Like, it's just all different kinds. I mean, I'm in the style of magical realism, right, where weird things can happen. Yeah, it's prose. It's not poetry. There's some poems in it because the 10-year-old is a poet, and so her section is filled with poems. And her character is one based most on my life, right? I was a 10-year-old poet in 1989. And yeah, so there's a little bit of everything. There's also a lot of letters that are happening between the eras. Yeah, it's all in my head. Like, I haven't written a lot of this down, but I have like maps for what I want to do and like butcher paper all over my studio for the stories that I just need to sit down and write. But it's National Poetry Month and I'm traveling now. So I'll get to it when I get to it. I know what I want to write. I have a good, 100 pages, but I have a lot more work to do. Yeah.
Are you treated differently within your family because you were the only one without an education?
Yeah, it's sad.
How so?
When I got accepted to go to school at Smith, I won't say who, but somebody in my family said, "You think you're white? Now you think you're white now?" No, I don't. So there's a resistance, right, that happens. You want them to be proud of you. And sometimes it's a hard thing, I think, because we've internalized racism so much that, like, our people, our culture, our gente don't know how to be proud for us. And so what we do know how to do is fight, we can throw down. It's hard, and I think that it takes a really strong person to be able to do it anyway. Like, you have to do it anyway, because that will change, right? I know my children will go to college, right? And so maybe their children, and and what we deal with at home when you're the first in the family to go to school, or you're the girl who's doing something with her life. And that's really strange for people, especially the men. Well, it's strange for the women too, because the women are like, well, how come she did it and I'm not? It's hard. It's the hardest thing, but it's not wrong, It's not wrong. And I think it's, one of the things that I was very lucky in that Smith is a women's college, and so I was surrounded by a lot of women in a very similar situation. And it's really important, I think, to find people who are like you and can support you and who know what you're going through, and also to talk about it with people who are not like you, right? Because you can learn from each other, and that's really important too. Yeah. Yes?
How does it feel to be the poet laureate of your city?
Sorry, when I make that face. It's crazy. It feels good. I mean, it feels, because I was this quiet girl writing, scribbling, sitting in her closet, writing on the walls. I think I fought so long for a chance to be heard that when something like this happens, it's like that careful what you wish for, right? Because now everybody's watching what I say, what I do. But like I said earlier, it's an honor, and I have a duty, right? I have a duty now, not because I represent my city, but I don't just represent my city. I represent the South Side. I represent the cotton pickers. I represent my grandmothers who had no education, my grandfather who had a 3rd grade education, right? So I carry all of that with me when I have a microphone in my hand, when I'm standing in a college classroom or in a university, whatever. That my city recognizes me as an important voice is huge. It's surreal almost, because all my life my voice has been so unimportant. When you grow up in the kind of situations that we grow up in, the kind of communities that we grow up in, where we're constantly marginalized or oppressed in different ways. So it's something that I grapple with all the time. It's been a year now. I have one more year. I'll never get used to it. It feels good. I will always like it. But it's hard. I mean, it's hard to navigate that space because I always carry that little 8-year-old girl inside me. I can't help it, I am the youngest poet laureate in the state of Texas. Yes, I am. Ever. Yes, Southside. Sorry. Thank you, Marty. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so should I read one more? Yeah? Okay. I'm going to share this one. This is the most recent poem that I've written. And when I lost my grandfather, I started making the connection between, the house was sold, the land was sold, and I started trying to sort of grapple with what really belongs to us and what doesn't belong to us. What do we get to claim and what do we not get to claim as our own? So this one's called Inheritance. I try to name it each time the blades of your shoulders break themselves from my grip, the scored being of our bodies. How like the ocean, your skin neither apologizes for its salt nor pleads for a chance to sustain all life. But you are not ocean, more earth, weight-bearing, warmed from the day's sun, your back, the whole of this land, plotted, widening, shoulders and rib and spine, staked. I want to bury my mouth in your dirt, taste the coppered bones buried there, patella of one century rubbed smooth by the clavicle of another, where the old campesinos lift black coffee to their lips with the hands of ghosts. Wander among their careful rows, tomatoes and sugar beets run like fire the length of your body, and only in dark can I taste the smoke curling from their lips, from your lips. There too, the footprints of babies, like a chorus of small mouths I want to kiss and kiss and kiss each one. So deep the ravine of a man's body that to lay my cheek against the skin of your back, I feel the Mexica stone from which you were carved. And when I cannot lay my cheek against the bronzed blood of your skin, I don't have the best of that. Yeah. And when I cannot lay my cheek against the bronzed blood of your skin, I send you my birth waters. That is not the right one. There it is. My birth waters to make sing the thirsting golondrinas of your landscape. Let me plant my garden here. I am still and on my knees. I am becoming sickle, and yours is the only land now that knows my name, recognizes the ore of my speech. There is tending to be done in the earth of you. And before I die here, I want to live here. That's all. Thank you. Thank you all.
For more information, please visit tlu.edu.